Unatazama Ndizi TV Afrika.
A very good morning, our viewer, wherever you are watching us from. This is Ndizi TV Africa, and this is the Morning Buzz, and this is where we inform you and involve you in knowing what has been going on since yesterday on the news, on the newspaper review this morning, and later on the trending stories. Not forgetting the morning report, of course, comprising of what went on yesterday in different regions in the country, more so on what we can be able to say is the by-elections heat that is going on different areas, more so the Mbeere North constituency, where they are saying that it has heated and unexpected might be happening between the two principals, that is the DCP and also the UDA candidates, Newton Karish and also the Leo Wamutende of UDA and also Newton Karish of DCP, that is opposition party, and also the current Kenya Kwanza government, trying to see who might be getting the day on 27th. Actually, today's on 19th October, today's on 19th November 2025, and the elections are about to happen in the next 1 week. That is on 27th of November 2025, where we are expecting to be seeing the rivals and also who is going to carry the day in the Mount Kenya on Mbeere North constituency. Of course, the deputy president and the current deputy president, he is saying that he will be camping there until they are done with the elections, and also the former deputy president Geoffrey Rigathi Gachagua also said that he is going to move house to house to ensure that all they have done what's supposed to be done, and also they have garnered and taken the the Mbeere North constituency by election, that is member of parliament seat, and we'll be waiting and see what is going to get happening, and also not forgetting that the other areas like Kaspul constituency and also Malava constituency and some by-elections within Nyamira County, that is the 3 wards in Nyamira County and other areas in the country. So this is where you will be able to get all these stories and be informed on what is going on and transpiring on, and especially that the education CS, of course, and also the PS in education, Julius Bitok, just gave a statement yesterday that the exams will be announced by 11th of December, so that the student will be ready for the KJSEA exams that was done this year 2025 as they prepare to give out the rollout and also the letters for the senior secondary school admissions, that is for next year 2026. So all of it here is where you'll be able to get it to ensure that you are having good time with us, and also you can be having a conversation via our social media platforms, that is Ndizi TV Africa. On our YouTube page we are live, and not forgetting that you can be able to keep the conversation via our SMS number, that is 21575, and also our WhatsApp number 0711 19 98 90, and that is where we'll be keeping on the conversation as we start our day. My name is Jeff Nyakundi, and also my director is Lucas Ouma. Welcome as we start our day by looking at what has been happening and also what is on the newspaper this morning, starting from the Standard newspaper, that is the Daily Nation, the Star, and also People's Daily, not forgetting Taifa Leo, and also the Business Daily newspaper. As we kick on, we start from our the Standard newspaper. And there is a story published on pages 8 and 9 of this Standard newspaper showing the New York Times expose. It has exposed what we call the slave trade billions. That is a story worthy you are reading, and it's dirty money that they are saying that it has been in Kenya's labor migration boom has morphed into a political gold mine. The country's most vulnerable women. It has become a conveyor belt of abuse, petrol, as they're saying, abuse, petrol, and state-enabled exploitation. And investigations reveals that how President William Ruto's government, instead of protecting domestic workers, brutalized in Saudi Arabia, has aligned itself with the lucrative staffing industry, live with the political ownership, conflicts of interest, and also granted workers safeguard with the First Family Insurance firm at the heart of the business. That is a story published on page 8 and page 9. So I already mentioned that it's a New York Times expose. If it can be moved a little bit up, and the photo we are seeing there, more so the people, or mostly the gender which is facing the most issues here are the girl child, or the female, which has been facing issues more so in Saudi Arabia and other countries when it comes to the work that they get onto that country to start or to work within, to ensure that they are providing for their family, but later on they get to serve and things done turns out. And from the photo that we are seeing there, that is Diana Chepkemoi, who is on the center, breaks down upon arriving at JKIA after being detained by her employer in Saudi Arabia. She was received by her mother and other relatives on September 6th, that is 2022. And right, Janet Njeri, a former worker in Saudi Arabia, weeps as he tells of the horror that she endured while working as a maid in the Middle East country. That is a story and also an expose that was given in the New York Times newspaper. And it is something that the government should have considered, and also protecting their own country people in those countries while working as either maids or providing services in those countries. And in numbers, actually, the statistics given here, that is in 1 in 10 Kenyans, staffing companies are owned by a current or a former political figure, likely an account due to concealed ownership. And also, in 130,000, that is 130,000 shillings, recruiters earn about, that is 1,000 USD, that is 130,000 per worker sent to Saudi Arabia, but spend only 200, that is 26,000 to meet training requirements. And also 31,000 shillings, Kenyan domestic workers in Saudi Arabia earn about 240 US dollars, that is 31,000 50,000 shillings monthly, unchanged for 7 years, and far below the 400 USD, that is 52,000, and by Philippine workers. And this is in numbers that's giving you what you can people to know and also grasp this morning as we are looking at this issue about Kenyans working abroad, more so in that is the Middle East countries, and of course talking about some of the companies that are doing this business of processing Kenyans to get there to work in those countries. Some of them are owned by their politicians, and 1 in 10 that is Kenyan staffing companies are owned by the current or former political figures, and likely an undercount due to concealed ownership, because nobody will be asking them questions, and it's nobody's business to know what you have done and do you have a valid license to carry out those businesses. And then that is why most of these Kenyan people get and suffer, because of the companies that are taking them there without a proper paper. And also somewhere elsewhere that is saying that one politically connected agency, Verbis Global Agencies, advertised 2,100 Saudi jobs in October alone, a whole worthy over 260 million in recruiter revenue. Of course, whoever was recruiting was to be getting over that is advertising over 2,100 jobs in Saudi, and this recruiter was to earn 260 million shillings as revenue. And this is something that as a parent, also as a member of the country, as a Kenyan, you can be able to feel for your own brother and sister who are working in those countries, but they are being undermined, and then their rights are just not taken rightly and also the way it should be. And that is an issue that the government should have looked into and also solve, as the newspaper had mentioned that the government is not protecting them. That was a New York Times expose showing the slave trade billions in the country, and also those politicians and some companies which are involved in that is betraying and also abusing the Kenyans in those countries, more so the Middle East countries where they get to work. And this is a story published on page 8 and also page 9 of this Standard newspaper. As we move on to our next paper to get to what are the headlines in it. That is the Daily Nation newspaper, and on the Daily Nation newspaper is all about the politics that is ongoing for the by-election. That is the 27th of November 2025, and also the 2027 general elections. Here, they're saying that Gachagua Kalonzo in bid to change 2027 poll rules, and it's all about politics. Petitioners accuse IEBC of multiple violation through its centralized handling of presidential results, the way they handle results once votes or once the voting is done. And some of the proposals, if we can move a little bit up to see some of these proposals that have been given out, there are 5 proposals there given out by Kalonzo and Rigathi Gachagua. They are saying that IEBC must gazette all polling stations at least 6 months before elections to curb ghost stations, and also ensure transparency. That is proposal number 1. Proposal number 2, IEBC must publish and avail the final voters register 3 months before elections to allow scrutiny and prevent what they call irregularities. And also proposal number 3, IEBC be prohibited from retallying or altering presidential results at the National Tallying Center after constituency declaration. And also number 4, IEBC must reconcile all ballots used, spoiled, and also unused at polling stations elections before transmitting results to prevent discrepancies. And also the fifth one is IBC to design a result transmission system where constituency declaration are final and also reconciliation precedes electronic results submission. And these are some of the proposals that is Rigathi Gachagua of DCP and also Kalonzo Musyoka of Wiper Party. They have given to ensure that the 2027 general elections there is some change and on the poll rules that are being happening. And the photo we are seeing there is a footage from the past elections and also Kenyans having their good time there to ensure that they are exercising their rightful mandate. As we push it a little bit up, it's here, leveling the playing field. There's a question. And a coalition of opposition leaders led by former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua and Wiper boss Kalonzo Musyoka have filed a high-stake constitutional petition seeking to overhaul how presidential elections votes are tallied and how results are transmitted and declared. The politicians also want the Electoral Commission to gazette all polling stations 6 months before the elections. That is on page study on page 4 and also page 5 of this Daily Nation newspaper, talking about the plans and also what Musyoka and Gachagua want to change in 2027 general elections. Elsewhere on page 2, it's all about the cybercrime law is defective, state agency tells Ruto. A pressure is mounting on President William Ruto to reconsider contentious provisions of the controversial Computer Misuse and also Cybercrime Act, and the Kenya National Commission of Human Rights termed the new law legal, defective, and also an affront of the freedom of expression and the right to privacy. Also, the state agency said some of its provisions risk criminalizing legitimate criticism and also dissent. That is a story published on page 2, and the photo we are seeing there is of the president having an address. Of course, the cyber crime law, which was amended and also signed into law like a month ago, is mounting pressure to the president to review what already he had signed to be the law. That is a story published on page 2 of the Daily newspaper. Elsewhere, on page 12, there's a story about transport, and what is here? What you need, like you will now pay higher fares in as digital taxi drivers get the nod to effect new rates. Of course, for those who want using the digital taxi drivers, of course, moving from one area to another using a Uber or a private car, and they have been given a nod to effect the new rates, that is the new payment. And also the digital tax app owners told to align their rates with the pricing advisory the Automobile Association of Kenya, that is AAK, issued in 2023 within a week. That is a story published on page 12, and this is a good news for the taxi people and also the drivers around who do their businesses as tax providers. And also elsewhere on page 10, that is talking about mothers' education. OU versus Sossion. This is the two figures who have served in the NAT before, and also the one is current. Fresh battle for Kenya National Union of Teachers amid ex-boss eligibility question. Mr. Sossion, who resigned in 2021, citing intense government frustration, says he is under immense pressure from teachers to contest. That is a story published on page 10. Remember, in a few weeks, we'll be getting to the fresh elections of the Kenya National Union of Teachers bosses or representatives. Remember that Wilson Sossion, also who was a former leader in the NAT, he's saying that, of course, he is getting pressure, immense pressure from teachers to get back to Kenya National Union of Teachers. But remember, earlier on 2021, he had resigned, terming the intense government frustrations, and now he wants to come back, and it is OU versus Association on the fresh battle for Nat amid ex-boss eligibility question. Is he eligible to get back, or it's issues about politics in education? Of course, that is what you can be able to grab and also know once you grab this newspaper on page 10, and that's where you can be able to get that story. On page 3, it's all about crime. That online lover could be plotting to steal from you. Of course, this is a story that has been published, and of course we'll be seeing more of it in other papers here. It's something that people have been doing, and some of them have been victims of it, more so the online dating. A few weeks ago, a British national in the coastal city of Mombasa lost a whopping of 800,000 to online dating fraudster, with the DCI now warning Kenyans to be aware of such scammers. And this is a story published on page 3. Of course, these are things that are happening, and maybe a little of them get to the newsrooms and also newspapers like this one. Of course, there is a national, that is a British national in the coastal city of Mombasa, lost 800,000 to an online dating fraudster. Hawa anasema kwamba mapenzi ya mitandao. Basi alipoteza zaidi ya shilingi 800,000 to the fraudster who was maybe pretending to be dating him on social media. And now the DCI is now warning Kenyans to be aware of such schemers. That is a story published on page 3 of this daily newspaper. And as we move on, of course, the key headline here is all about the 2027 Kalonzo bid and Gachagua to change the poll rules. And of course, we have seen some of their proposals. That is, they have given 5 proposals that they want them to be enacted, and also IBC to review and also have them. I'm also talking about gazetting the polling stations at least 6 months before the elections, and also getting the voters register 3 months before before the elections, and also IBC to be prohibited from retallying and also tallying the presidential results, that is in the National Tallying Center. Of course, some of those the proposals that Kalonzo and Rigathi Gachagua have given out to ensure that they are changing something in 2027 general elections. Now, moving on to the Star newspaper. The main headline they are talking about Mbadi team to pay 8 billion for COVID vaccine not delivered. Of course, this is another issue that is affecting the Kenyans, so the health sector. This story published on page 4 and also page 5, talking about the Treasury is going to pay 8 billion for COVID vaccines that were not delivered in the country, and this is the consentment was destroyed in a European warehouse, and then the government is going to be paying for the same because of it was ordered. And maybe we want to understand more, why is the government going to pay 8 billion shillings for the COVID vaccines that vaccines not delivered in the country? Then grab these Star newspapers, and you can be able to review it on page 4 and also page 5. Talking about the by-elections, Kindiki, Gachagua lock horns in Mbeere North by-election, and of course, as I earlier on mentioned, between Wamutende and Karish, it is between, that is Kenya Kwanza and also the opposition, and more so the DCP party, who between the two is going to be taking the day on 27th of November 2025. That is the by-election planned to take place in Mbeere North, and also also other constituencies in the country, and not forgetting Malava constituency, and not forgetting Kaspul constituency, and also some parts and some wards within the country, and also some counties. Of course, that is a story going to be able to see the current deputy president and also the former deputy president Geoffrey Rigathi Gachagua. You're going to be able to see there Kindiki is seated there inside a house, maybe being served and also engaging with the people, and also going to be able to see Rigathi Gachagua moving around and also greeting the villagers in what they are terming as on doing the campaigns to ensure that they are winning on this by-election that is happening on 27th. And elsewhere, there's a story about United Opposition split forces in a by-election fight with the president, and of course there is what we are seeing there, a photo of Rigathi Gachagua and also Kalonzo Musyoka, and they're saying that there is a lot which is happening in the country, more so in this by-election thing, and of course the Malava constituency where we saw that United Opposition might split forces in a by-election, more so the Malava one, as they are fighting with the President William Samoei Ruto to ensure that they are garnering what they term as showing the green light on what might be happening in 2027 general election. That is a story also you can be able to read on the Standard newspaper. Elsewhere, on the top of this newspaper, there is what we are seeing as Fred Kakango, the Mombasa magistrate, why ODM is President Ruto's 2027 political bedrock. Of course, why is Pwani or Mombasa will be on the top of the newspaper, will be the bedrock or will be the political bedrock of William Samoei Ruto. And elsewhere, the news that is NCIC drops Gachagua 4 governors and 10 members of parliament over hate speech. Of course, what these members of parliament, what these politicians are mentioning and also saying, uttering out in public political rallies, and also whenever they get a chance to speak. So the NCIC is on probing the former deputy president Rigathi Gachagua, the 4 governors in the country, and also 10 members of our parliament over what they call hate speech. And that is what you can be able to get on the Star newspaper. And the key headline is about the Mbadi team to pay 8 billion shillings for vaccines that were not delivered in the country, with something which is triggering now, which might be triggering your mind as things are moving to the worst situation, more so in economic way. As we move on the People's Daily. On the People's Daily, of course, we have on the People's Daily we have been talking about the political battle lines and also the 2027 general elections. And here the key headline is all about Kenya 2027 power deals, rising tension, and also the fight for key regions. That is a story published on page 4. And of course, there, if my director can be able to show you well the map of Kenya, and also how it has been how it has been splitted. Of course, we can be able to see the Rift Valley. That is marked as the UDS zone. We are seeing the opposition on the eastern part of the country, and then we are seeing the northeastern part is UDA. Of course, the central Kenya, that is opposition, and the coast is all about the battleground. Nairobi County also the battleground. Also, Western Kenya is the battleground, and ODM in Nyanza, except Gusii region. The way the publisher and also the writer, the editor of this story has done it. Of course, Nyanza is known to be ODM, except Gusii region as it is being published here. On the other side, you're going to be able to see the voters' landscape, the family secured with Ruto. We are talking about the Rift Valley. that is except Nakuru, talking about the Rift Valley, that is North Rift, South, apart from Nakuru County, talking about ODM except the coast, ODM areas except the coast and those parts of the Western Kenya. And the key battleground is now Nairobi, Bungoma, Trans Nzoia, Lamu, Taita Taveta, Isiolo, and Marsabit. The political potentials, that is northeastern growing political presence and also members, talking about the coast, emotionally tied to opposition, and also Kajiado is all about ODM factor. Then when we talk about the opposition, that is Gachagua, Kalonzo, and Matiang'i, other factors, the Gen Z, and also the promise of for the future. And this is actually the key on what has been on this the People's Daily newspaper, talking about what might be happening in 2027, analyzing how these might be going around. And of course, we have seen the battlegrounds and also the farm as a keyword places by Ruto, and we can be able to see northeastern, we can be able to see Rift Valley apart from Nakuru, talking about the ODM regions, but except the Gusii region, and also their position is getting it in central Kenya, and the battleground, that is coast, Nairobi, Western Kenya, and also some parts of eastern part of the country, that is talking about Ukambani area and other parts, that is a part neighboring them. And of course, we have seen the key battlegrounds more so Nairobi County, Bungoma, Trans Nzoia, Lamu, Taita Taveta, and Isiolo, and also not forgetting Marsabit. That is the Kenya 2027 battle lines, and also for the presidential elections more so in those areas. And now, if things might not change, if they remain like this, then there will be more tough ways of seeing who is going to win the general elections for 2027. Elsewhere, on page 5 of this newspaper, why Uhuru, that's on the top of the People's Daily, they're talking about why Uhuru's return is giving UDA and Gachagua sleepless nights ahead of the next polls. Why the return of the former president, that is Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, the 4th president of the country of Kenya, is giving sleepless nights to UDA and also the Gachagua brigade sleepless nights ahead of the next polls, that is as they preparation for the next general elections. Remember, on that photo we are seeing some leaders of the Jubilee party by the party leader Uhuru Kenyatta. We can be able to see Fred Matiang'i there, Jeremiah Kioni, the Secretary General, and other party members in that photo. And of course, the return of Uhuru Kenyatta is giving some political figures and also some coalitions sleepless nights, and when they termed the deputy party leader to be their presidential candidate for 2027 and none other than Fred Okengo Matiang'i, who was the former Interior Cabinet Secretary in Uhuru's regime. And that's a story you can be able to get through on page 5, that is through the People's Daily, where they are talking about politics. Actually, if you have been keen, since last week, around Thursday, Friday, and also this week, Monday, yesterday, and also today, they are talking more about politics and what they are giving some data that can be either used as we are approaching the 2027 general elections. Elsewhere, of course, that is the key headline on the People's Daily. As we move on, is that to Taifa Leo. Of course, Taifa Leo, the key headline talking about mapenzi mtandaoni sumu, DCI wasema pale. Makachero waonya wahalifu wanaoteka hisia za wanaotafuta mapenzi kabla ya kuwapora na hata kuwadhuru. Taarifa ambazo zimechapishwa katika ukurasa wa pili katika gazeti hili la Taifa Leo. Tukisonga juu kidogo pale, anasema kwamba idara ya upelelezi wa Chinai DCI inatoa ama imewaonya Wakenya na wageni wanaotafuta mapenzi mtandaoni kufuatia ongezeko la matapeli wanaotumia majukwaa hayo kusaka wajumba na kuwapora pesa na mali zao. Taarifa ambazo zimechapishwa katika ukurasa wa pili katika gazeti hili la Taifa Leo, ikiwa kwamba picha ambayo tunaiona pale ni ya mkurugenzi wa idara ya upelelezi wa jinai Mohamed Ibrahim Amin akiwahutubia waandishi wa habari afisini mwake kwenye picha hii ya awali pale, na ametoa tahadhari kuhusu mapenzi mtandaoni. Katika vidokezo vingine ni kwamba ukurasa wa pili, pressure kwa Ruto kuhusu sheria mpya, shinikisho zaendelea kwa Rais William Samoei Ruto kuhusu sheria ya matumizi ya kompyuta, taarifa ambazo zimechapishwa katika ukurasa wa pili. Na kwingine kwa pale ukurasa wa tano tunamuona Kalonzo Kingi wajibuaga Magarini. Amason Kingi na Kalonzo Musyoka hatimaye wamechitoza kampeni za uchaguzi mdogo Magarini, taarifa ambazo zimechapishwa katika ukurasa wa tano. Na kwingineko taarifa za kigeni na bila shaka kimataifa, ukurasa wa 8 wanasema kwamba United Nations yaunga ushauri wa Trump Gaza. UN yaunga kutumika kwa majeshi ya kimataifa kudumisha usalama wa Gaza, taarifa ambazo zimechapishwa katika ukurasa wa 8. Na tukirejea upande wa juu mwa gazeti hili ni taarifa kuhusiana na gavana Nyaribo hatarini kutemwa, ikiwa kwamba wabunge wa kaunti ya ama wale wawakilishi wadi katika kaunti ya Nyamira watajaribu tena kumngoa gavana Amos Nyaribo, taarifa ambazo zimechapishwa katika ukurasa wa pili. Kumbuka kwamba siku ya Jumatatu ile hoja ya kumngoa mamlakani ilifikishwa katika bunge lile la Nyamira, katika bunge la kaunti ya Nyamira. Hiyo jana lilikuwa linajadiliwa, basi tunaangazia ikiwa kwamba wametaja wiki hii siku ya Ijumaa watakuwa wanakusanya maoni kutoka kwa wana kaunti ama wenye kaunti ya Nyamira ili kuangazia kama watamtuma nyumbani gavana huyu ama ataenda kusikizwa pale Senate ama mambo yataenda namna gani katika kaunti ya Nyamira, taarifa ambazo zimechapishwa ukurasa wa pili. Kwingineko ukurasa wa 20 tukiangazia spoti, Italia ya laani FIFA kwa kutofusu. Koja asema mvumo wa timu moja kila kundi kufusu kwa fainali ni dhalimu muno, ni taarifa ambazo zimechapishwa katika ukurasa wa 20. Wapenzi wa soka, basi hapa ndipo mtakuwa mnafuatilia taarifa hizo aswa kufusu kwa fainali za michezo ambayo inaendelea humu ulimwenguni pale, na hiyo Italia ikilaani FIFA kwa kutofusu pale. Kwa kwamba ni baadhi tu ya taarifa ambazo zimechapishwa katika gazeti hili la Taifa Leo, ikiwa kwamba mapenzi mtandaoni ni sumu, DCI wasema pale, ikiwa kwamba makachero haya wanatoa tahadhari kwa wale ambao wanatafuta mapenzi mtandaoni, kwani mambo huenda yakawa tofauti. Ni baada ya mgeni moja hapa nchini kutapeliwa pale Mombasa zaidi ya shilingi 1,800. Tukisonga mbele on other stories on the People's Daily, talking about members of parliament order regulator to increase power prices. Of course, this is not great news. Talking about the increased power prices, new charge to help recover rural electrification debt, and also April Chief Executive terms the directive unfair to consumers. Of course, talking about what is published on the Business Daily, about the energy in the country, and the story published on the story published on page 2 of this newspaper, talking about the Kenyans face a steep electricity bill in the wake of a push by Parliament to have consumers pay higher charges to enable Kenya Power to recover billions of shillings spent on the rural electrification process, and something that the National Assembly Committee on Energy wants the Energy and the Petroleum Regulatory Authority, EPRA, to introduce through the monthly bills burst through costs from from July 2026 to help Kenya Power recover the billions it spent to building and maintaining the rural electricity grid. And also the Treasury is expected to reimburse Kenya Power for grid expenses in rural setting where the uptake of electricity is not enough to generate a return for the listed utility. Of course, they are talking about the 29.9 billion shillings and paid bill for rural electrification here and there. That's a story published on page 2. Elsewhere, as we move on, there is a story published about the counties with best worst uptake of insurance. That is a story published by Patrick Alusula, talking about Nairobi, Kiambu, Murang'a, Nyeri, and Kirinyaga counties top the list of regions with they're talking about regions that is top the list with the highest insurance uptake, and also Kisumu, Siaya, and Meru sits at the bottom of the access ladder. Of course, a financial sector deepening survey shows that the proportion of Nairobi city residents reporting access to at least one insurance product in their own name, excluding social health cover, stood at 12% last year, trying or rather tying with Kiambu, and also they are followed by Murang'a at 11.3%, Nyeri at 10%, and also Kirinyaga at 9.5%. Of course, talking about that story is published on page 4, talking about some of the counties where they are best, and also we can be able to see the worst uptake of insurance. And elsewhere, what we are seeing, digital taxi drivers protest unfair rates. Some of them, they are reacting on the demonstration called by the Joint Association of All Rider-Hailing Apps Drivers outside Ministry of Transport offices in Nairobi. That is yesterday. They protested that they termed unfair rates and gross violation of the workers' rights. That is a story published on the Business Daily, and it's something that they were given a nod on to effect a law that was passed in 2023. Elsewhere, on the ticker side, is that the reprieve for Nairobi Hospital in 208 million row with the ex-CEO, that is Nairobi Hospital, has been handed to reprieve by the Labor Relation Court in a 208.3 million shillings employment dispute with its former CEO, Dr. Alan Pampa, a story published on page 6. Elsewhere, Kenya Power's Women Youth Tender Award jumped to 3.5 billion. That is the Kenya Power awarded contracts valued at 3.5 billion shillings to youth, women, and also disabled persons in the year in the year to June 2025, marking an over four-fold increase from the 614 million shillings issued a year earlier on. That is a story published on page 7, showing that there have been increase on the women, young people, and also people living with disability who got tenders through Kenya Power. That is the Kenya Power's Women Youth Tender Award jumped to 3.5 billion shillings. As we move on, is that on the CPK, that is another story, that is CPK under pressure to hold more dollars on rising imports. And here they're saying that the CPK of that's the Central Bank of Kenya must hold at least 1.17 trillion, that is close to 1.9 US billion, 9.1 that is US dollar billion in hard currency reserves to meet its requirement of keeping at least 4 months of the country's import requirement as orders for goods from abroad rise. And that is a story published on page 14 of this Business Daily newspaper, talking about the CPK under pressure to hold more dollars on rising imports. Elsewhere, on top of this newspaper, there is stories that are published. They are, of course, talking about the market data and also the exchange rates on shilling and also the USD. Of course, Monday and Tuesday, it remains at 129.36. That is on Monday, and also on Tuesday, a little bit higher by some cents there. That is to 129.52. Of course, the change of -0.12%. And of course, on page 9, there is that intelligence story published there by Nderitu Murithi, talking about I had the difficult but pleasant task of explaining the economy on radio and also television last Monday in my mother tongue. Of course, you can be able to understand of the intelligence and also what happened when this guy was just giving explaining about the economy on radio and also TV on the vernacular languages. And elsewhere, they're talking about how young Kenyans are thriving in Mauritius. That's a story published on page 19, and also about the lifestyle and what is happening in Mauritius as young Kenyans are thriving in that country. Of course, as we move on, that is the main story on the Business Daily, talking about members of parliament are yet to order the increase of power prices in the country. Just going through, maybe doing a recap of what we have underwent or what we have discussed here from the Standard newspaper. The slave trade, talking about the Kenyans who are suffering in Saudi Arabia or the Middle East countries, talking about the expose that was done by the New York Times. And so talking about in numbers 1 in 10 Kenyans. Of course, some of these companies are owned by politicians in the country. Elsewhere on the Daily Nation, we saw that Gachagua Kalonzo, in a bid to change 2027 ball rules, as they are giving some of the proposals, of course, on what they think that should be done. And of course, on the same paper, we saw the president on pressure to review the cybercrime law. And elsewhere, we have seen about the EU versus Zosion, the fresh battles of the Kenya National Union of Teachers. That's the NAT, who wants to get back. That is Zosion, terming that the pressure from teachers wants him back, and also remember that he had resigned earlier on. That is in 2021. And also on the Star newspaper, of course, we saw that Mbadi's team is planning to pay 8 billion shillings for the COVID vaccine that were never delivered in the country. And they have been saying that those consignments were destroyed in Europe warehouse. Elsewhere, of course, we saw in the same paper about we saw about the campaigns of the by-election that is happening on 27th of this month in the country. So that one of Mbeele North constituency, where we have seen the former deputy president and also the current deputy president, they are on a political fight to ensure that either of them is gaining. And elsewhere on the People's Daily, of course, we saw they are giving some data about the 2027, the power deals, rising tension, and also the fight for the key regions. And of course, we saw there we have the Kenyan, that is the Kenyan map, split into some areas. That is, for example, Iftifari, northeastern, eastern part of it, central Kenya, the coast, Nairobi, and also some areas that are termed to be either opposition, battleground, or the Kenya Kwanza, that is a voter landscape. And elsewhere, on Taifa Leo, we saw that the DCI is giving Kenyans warning, more so those who are dating online, talking about mapenzi mtandaoni sumu. DCI awaonya wa Kenya. Hii ni baada ya moja kutoka nchi za nje ambaye ilitembea humu nchini kutapeliwa shilingi 800. Na kwingine tuliona pale kwamba Gavana Nyaribo kikaangoni pale Nyamira, as the county the members of the county assembly are trying to get him off off power through impeachment motion that was tabled on Monday. Yesterday it was discussed, as they have mentioned that this week on Friday they will be gathering and also getting the citizens acknowledgement or maoni ya Wanyamira pale to see whether the governor will be going home or he will remain in power. And that is all about the newspaper review this morning, and we are taking a short break. Once back we'll be reviewing the morning report as it has been on what has been trending, and also not forgetting that we'll be having trending stories later on. We will be having our morning mingo discussion this morning, so don't go too far. Remember that you can engage us through our social media platforms on our YouTube channel Ndizi TV Africa, Facebook Ndizi TV Africa, TikTok, Instagram, and also X Ndizi TV Africa. And also you can keep the conversation going via our SMS number, that is 21575. Not forgetting that you can also engage on us on WhatsApp through 0711 19 98 90. Don't go too far. I'll be back. I'm Jeff Nyakonde.
Is a strive everybody longs for. Human beings will spend their time online searching remedies for conditions challenging them. Some will go to medical facilities seeking medical help, while others will use herbal means to keep their health hazards. I am Chemutai Kirui, and every week on Afya Yetu, we open the doors for life-changing conversations from wellness and nutrition, preventing diseases, managing chronic illnesses, and even mental health. We bring expert advice, real-life stories, and practical solutions that touch every part of your life. Join me, Chemutai Kirui, on Ndizi TV Africa Afya Yetu Health Show every Friday from 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. and be part of the change.
Naam, ni wakati wa kusikiza sauti inayobeba maono, busara na hali halisi ya kisiasa humu nchini. Karibu katika kipindi Sauti ya Uongozi. Hapa tutakuwa tunazungumza na viongozi kujieleza katika hali halisi ya yale ambayo waliahidi kuyafanya, na bila shaka kukupa wewe mtazamaji nafasi ya kuzungumza kama mwananchi wa kawaida kwa yale ambayo waliahidi kuyafanya katika maendeleo humu nchini.
But after making the payment, they delete it. Now, what kind of accounting is that? Because you are supposed to maintain the details of whoever you paid so that the figures can balance.
Watu ambao wanafanyiwa sio kwamba ni wale wananchi wote ambao wako pale wanafanyiwa ile funding, ni makundi haswa. Na zile pesa kufika katika makundi ikamfikia mwananchi yule ambaye alikuwa anachangiwa akapata kiasi kidogo cha pesa. Ina maana kule kuzurula, ule msururu wa kuzunguka inakuwa ni kama ni null and void kwa mwananchi, anaiona kwamba analagaiwa.
If you graduated in 2016 and somebody graduated in 2020, the 2016 was to be given priority to get that job. But nowadays, members of parliament have taken over. They get the letters, they dish them in funerals, others they sell them to the highest bidder.
Kila wiki tutakuletea mahojiano ya kina na viongozi kutoka sekta mbalimbali na jamii kwa ujumla. Je, unajiuliza maswali ni kipi ambacho kinajiri nyuma ya pasia la uongozi? Basi hapa ndipo unapaswa kukaa mkao wa kutazama na kusikiza. Usikose Sauti ya Uongozi kila siku ya Jumamosi kuanzia saa 1 jioni hadi saa 3 jioni ndani ya Ndizi TV Africa na